Hello, everybody, and welcome to our latest episode of the Lowdown on Low Code. We have an amazing lineup for you today. Mr. Alan Trefler, the CEO of Pegasystems, is joining us. So this is one you do not want to miss, and you should listen all the way through to the end because you're going to hear some very insightful things, I'm sure. Quick intro from myself, Francis Carden. I was actually founder of a company that Alan and Pegasystems acquired back in 2016. And I met Alan for the first time around that time in London. And we got talking because Alan was describing to me what this low code thingy was. And of course, immediately resonated with me because way back when I started out in software development, we had a term and a technology called 4GLs. I'm sure Alan will remember this conversation prompted here. And so we discussed all about Lowdown on low code. And one of the things that came to me is like, why didn't they call it 5GL then? And Alan just laughed and went, no, we're never calling it that. And here we are. Today, the world has woken up to low code, no code, and all the things that go with it. And I retired from Pegasystems back last year in October. And have joined my fellow colleagues in analysis.tech because low code is something I'm extremely passionate about. I may have started in the 4GL world, but I see myself finally retiring in the low code world, something I'm heavily, heavily passionate about. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Rob Koplowitz to take the lead here and follow up with you guys shortly.
Thanks, Francis. Alan, thank you so much for joining. We here at Lowdown and Low Code are brought to you by analysis.tech. We'll talk a little bit more about what we do a little bit later in the podcast. But I want to get to Alan right away. So Alan, we have sort of a standard way that we introduce these things, and we ask people like, what's your background? Where'd you came from? We call it the Trask moment. What was it that drove you into tech and into the role that you're in now? Just as a little bit of, to throw a little competitive juice out there. Don Sherman was on the show earlier. Don's story started out with stand-up comedy and a help desk. It's pretty freaking good. And Himanshu Arora of Rhino.ai started out as a welder. So a pretty good story. Where'd you come from, Alan, and how did you get to where you are today?
Well, when I was in university at Dartmouth College, I won a major international chess tournament as a sophomore in college, which was really quite improbable and more than a little bit lucky. But as a result of that, I was recruited by the computer science department to teach computers to play chess, which in that era was a hard thing to do. We were operating on computers that had the fraction of what anybody would use on any sort of problem of that type today. And we actually got it to play chess reasonably well. We were really very proud of it, though, we could kick its butt. Very much the opposite of the way it would happen with any human player today. But that's how I got involved in both thinking about systems that had aspects of expert systems to them, and also trying to understand how to deal with pretty complex and, most importantly, evolving problems, like, once again, teaching it to play chess. So that's how I got pulled into it. When I graduated, I went to, earn a living, and I ended up working as a consultant for primarily large New York banks, though I lived in Boston and would fly down every week, which was very glamorous as, a 21-year-old, 22-year-old. But what I was struck by was how onerous the programming and software development world was, even at these institutions that were considered to be the most sophisticated in the world, and doing it. And it really gave me the idea for what eventually became Pegasystems and our approach to low code.
Great. Francis?
Well, it's interesting because, the term low code, no code, and all the things that go with it. For me, I'm passionate about getting rid of all code. Now, we're never going to do that for systems engineering, but I've just, I was a coder in my early days. I wrote applications, and after 45 years of being a vendor, I'm now an analyst. So this gives me a bit of right to sort of maybe, give a very strong position, but also try to extract other people's points of view. I think that The low code market is gaining traction. I don't know whether that's because people are fed up with code and legacy or because AI is now putting a new lease of life into it. I mean, Pega's been very, very successful in the low code market. But why do you think now? What's really driving? I mean, everybody's been kind of growing at different paces, etc. But what's really driving it now, Alan, and putting it on the map?
Well, we may have a slightly different opinion than some of the others in the space, which has never bothered me, Francis. Uh, but, when we first got into this, when the original inspiration for what we began doing at Pega, God forbid, 41 years ago. So we've been working this and agonizing and really thinking about it going back a very, very long time. When we got into it, the inspiration to me was CAD CAM. When I looked across the aisle at compatriots of mine who were working in technical fields, but weren't doing what I was doing, which was, taking, we didn't call them user stories back then. We used to call them specifications, but taking specifications and doing functional and technical decomposition and data flow diagrams, and then coding cryptic words into text files and filing them, in the state-of-the-art languages of the era like C and Pascal. I looked at that and I said, my God, these people in manufacturing, they're actually doing wireframe diagrams. They're actually creating a model of what it is they want built. And they create that model, the software guides them. They can pass the model to an associate. The associate can make changes. And the software will make sure that the physics doesn't break. And then in that era, they could attach it to a milling machine and actually start creating some parts. Today you could do miracles with 3D printing. But looked at that whole idea of operating off of a model and operating from the model to the realization and said, why don't we apply this to software? And I think that's actually the true way to think about what a lot of people now call low code and no code. It's really not about the code. It's really, are you creating a model of how you want to run your business? And in doing that model, are you adopting certain principles that will make the business run more effectively? And then from that, have the model generate whatever has to be generated, code or executables that are going to actually make it viable, make it live. And that's what Pega has been about since our inception.
Well, it's interesting because I talk to a lot more people about trying to describe low code, no code, and all the things that with it as a model application development environment. It's like if you think about a structured way of building an enterprise application, then it's like, well, why wouldn't you do that? And in fact, why wouldn't we have done that 40 years ago? And I tell people, it's like, well, it was kind of before its time. We did have to write code in very small amount of space. We did have to compile it to make it run fast. We had all this fragmentation around user interfaces and databases, and even had to choose the hardware vendor, if you remember, and the network vendor. And it just became a kind of a spaghetti mess. And this is really, I think, that's created this 40, 50-year-old legacy mindset that still exists to some form today. But those that make that transition to the model thinking, whether it's low code or sticking with the model, I think is really what's the game changer here. And the technology that we have today is nothing like we had then. And so trying to get people to forget how they used to think of applications, if they could get onto this and think of it this way, I think it's quite game changing. You think?
Well, I think it is, and I love the word model, though the incidence of large language models now coming into the picture, which of course are completely different than some of what we're talking about here.
And Lego models.
Exactly. So the word's a tough word, but the idea of being able to model, create sort of the digital twin, as it were, of how you wanted your business to operate, and from that to actually literally run the business, I think is an incredibly powerful idea. The reason that code has been so prevalent, as I think about it, is that you've got a lot of people who were coders who didn't want to give it up. We still encounter people who think that, to be a real developer, you don't want to worry about these models. You just want to get into the code and do stuff. And, I happen to think that that's a little ridiculous, but it's hard to implement cultural change. The market, though, is now demanding it. The market is now saying, hey, we recognize there's a better way to do this. And the only way we're going to get rid of these horrible legacies, the technical debt that exists in these companies, is by doing things differently.
Hallelujah. Rob?
So, Alan, let's poke on this a little bit more, and 100% agreement on the concept of model. And I would say, it's highly conflated with the concept of orchestration, which has become a very hot buzzword out of the market, which is, by the way, very, very difficult to do in code, right? So, but the visual nature of it, right? So when John Reimer and I pulled the low code and the digital process automation research together, it was this recognition that digital process automation vendors were working with models. Models are visual in nature. But I remember this epiphany sitting with Russell Keyser in a conference room at Forrester doing Wave Labs and thinking, this is a really, really good low code development platform, right? I mean, because it's gone from models to the visual metaphor throughout your development environment. We are seeing, I think we're getting past this, but there's this concept that, well, I'm going to use low code for the simple things, and I'm going to code the hard things, right? Well, Pega's never been in the business of building easy things, right? So, I mean, how do we go about exploding this myth that real developers code? And if you're building a really, really sophisticated application, it should be done in code. I mean, this to me feels like poppycock.
Well, I think there are a couple of ways that we've been working to address it, and that I think now with the advent of generative AI, there's just a whole new sphere to go after this that we're super excited about. We've been looking to prove that we can handle some of the world's biggest and most complicated problems. I mean, Pega was the engine that did the 2020 census. That was an amazingly large data,
I remember that
processing exercise. And it also included having, 350,000 concurrent users on mobile phones going door to door to complete the census for the people who don't fill in their forms and send it in. So, we've shown the ability to scale to the things that people were afraid that sort of low code couldn't scale to. And by the way, some of it can't, and that's not necessarily bad. I mean, different problems can use and should use different solutions at times. Though there are real advantages to being able to have a common architecture across the different things that a business does. But I think blowing up the myth of scale, which Pega certainly, I believe we've, clearly demonstrated it, and also being able to address the myth of complexity. One of the things that we've done with our model, which is in some ways you can draw analogies to CAD/CAM or to things like Adobe Illustrator, is our model operates in layers. What we found when we looked at businesses is what made businesses complicated was that things were similar and things were different. And traditional low-code approaches, frankly, traditional programming approaches, do a really lousy job of saying, hey, I'm going to create this lending process or this onboarding process, but I want it to be different in for some customer segments, for some parts of my business, for some countries. I need to find a way to layer differences in. And all of the architectures that come from this procedural orientation, whether it's a procedural programming language, like they pretty much all are these days, or whether it's a picture, a FileNet style picture of the stages or the steps you want to go through, these procedural models don't lend themselves well to incorporating deltas, to saying, hey, I want a variation, but I only want to change this 10% or this 5%. They force people to copy, paste, and re-implement. And Pega has solved this with an architecture we call our layer cake, which sits right at the heart of our system and our model and lets you, incorporate differences in a way that still gives you an enormous read.
That's great. Thank you, Alan. And I want to revisit the concept of scale a little bit later in the conversation, because I think it's pretty clear that Pega's awfully good at scaling up. We want to visit the concept of scaling down, which is kind of a different challenge, but we'll do that in a few minutes. Hey, folks who are listening, thank you for tuning in. Lowdown on Low Code is brought to you by Analysis.Tech. If you'd like to interact more with myself or with Francis Carden, with John Reimer, Dave Marcus, Andy Bartels, Ryan Duguid. Find us at analysis.tech. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button on the podcast. And then just a quick shout out to our new research stream, which is going to be around evaluative research in the area of low code and digital process automation. We're kicking that off. We'd love to get your thoughts on that. So, Francis, back to you.
Yeah, I want to pick up on some things you said there, Alan. There's a lot of informative stuff. And I think about the whole concept of reuse. I always used to say it's reuse on steroids. I use the API and enterprise service bus analogy for like let's just copy an API and then just make a slight modification, add it, and then suddenly you've got 2,000 APIs that do similar things on an enterprise service bus that might as well be like, in a traffic jam. It's just crazy. And one of the things I always loved when we first met was this dream you had about the way applications should be built. Now, not everybody jumped onto this, right? If only they did. But that's what we're here for. That's what we're here at analysis.tech to really drive home this whole, passion for low code. And I think of what's holding us back, the things that are holding us back to really make this 10x the market size that it should be, because it should be 100x. But let's just not go too far. And what the kind of things that come to me is we're very, and I'm pushing the blame here, but it's the CTO, the CEO, do they have a career to keep this legacy shit around whilst, because in 3 years are going to go on move to somewhere else? And do we have to attack the board? Because the companies that have made this transition from all this legacy debt, this legacy code, this spaghetti junk, I call it, right? It's being squeezed to the point where it's just going to explode if they don't make this transition. So what are the things that are going to sort of force this to get to that board CEO level discussion, to force them to look at least at what they could possibly do to start? I think you said some of this on the CNBC call recently as well. It's like, they hate these applications anyway. Now they can get rid of them. There's no excuse. How do we get them on board to that?
Well, I think part of it is not just getting them to show that initiative, but showing them that it's easy enough they can really do it. Mm-hmm. Because let's face it, replacing systems can be daunting. And
that's the excuse. They can't be done, right?
And we've put a lot of work, particularly in the last year and a half, into trying to use AI to address that. But the other thing is you have to get rid of it the right way. Candidly, I think the low code business and the way a lot of these systems grew up have perpetuated some of the issues and some of the serious problems that exist in the code world. In some cases, actually made it worse. And it's only by having the low code or the model driven, have models that really work for the customer and support not just the reuse, but being able to build systems that don't fall. There are two traps that I see organizations fall into all the time, and that are prevalent in the code and the low code world. That we've put a lot of effort into trying to understand those and try to work to avoid those two traps.
Do you see that? It's the shake-up, because you're right, it's not rip and replace. This is not an or situation. It's right, being cognitive of the fact that we've got to keep some of these systems or the data around for a bit longer, or maybe for a lot longer. But often that gets in the way from doing anything at all and just keeping status quo. And I think that's the frustration bit for me. But it is changing now. And I think, some of the things that we saw you do with Blueprint, the idea that AI can be rapidly applied to this model thinking, it's kind of like, it hasn't been around for very long, but what you've done so far and what you're releasing, and this industry generally jumping on AI and releasing it into these models, I think is really exciting. And maybe this is the thing that makes the difference and brings people to it.
We've seen an upsurge in Blueprint use that's unlike anything I've ever experienced. Since we released this stuff in, Pega World in June, since that happened, we've had over 60,000 blueprints done by customers and partners, which, for us is way, 2 orders of magnitude more viral than anything else we've done. And the level of enthusiasm in those organizations and the level of innovation that we see coming from them is really exciting, because, for folks who aren't familiar with it, what Blueprint does is it uses generative AI to take Pega's best practices about how do you organize work? How do you want to create the concept of stages and steps and work and interfaces. And how do you make that real, coupled with a lot of our industry experience that we've gained from having worked in this? No customer specific things, but things that relate to our knowledge of certain types of approval processes and other sorts of things. Plus, go out to the open internet and say, hey, for whatever it is you want to automate onboarding a client, you want to automate the determination of the correct insurance amount. What internet is the best practice to do it? And we take those elements and we bring them together into a blueprint that takes the best of all the pieces and then presents it to people in a way that really helps them, frankly, think innovatively. And it challenges them to do things better than they're doing historically. We've since added in, for example, the ability to take a customer's BPMN notation or their manuals and be able to pull that sort of documentation into that process so that it can be incorporated. We now allow customers to upload their API signatures. So when it does this, it's going to use the actual back-end APIs that will update their systems of record, that they want to retain. And being able to do all of this under the power of AI has massively simplified and addressed the traditional issue that I think Pega had, where we were perceived as being complicated at times. It's actually staggeringly simplified it, but it also eliminates the risk that people are going to screw things up. The ability to use the AI to provide the guidance in a positive, affirmative way, instead of, we used to have what we call guardrails, where the system would kind of warn you when you were trying to do something wrong. It's better to prevent that and to catch it up front. And, with the power of AI, it now does it with staggeringly little typing and, 11 languages. I was in Europe 2 weeks ago and I was visiting with some of my Dutch customers, and they're doing their blueprints and generating the work, and it's in Dutch. I have no idea what it said. They told me it was really very good.
I told you it was real. But it's come up. I mean, AI generally has snuck up, I think, on all of us. I mean, I'm not saying we were blindsided, but what came in the last year, 18 months, has just been absolutely incredible. And I used Blueprint at Pega World this year. And literally, Rob, in a couple of minutes, I built this template of an application that was, it was a model. You got to see it and you go, I like that, or I don't like that, and change it and tweak it. And I think that's really what we see happening. And I'm also really onto this idea that, when you apply AI this way against these applications, it is waking people up that didn't imagine this as being possible. That they can start with a blueprint. They can actually get their ideas down on paper. But let's go beyond that. It's not just paper. It's like, there's an app. I can see it, good, bad, or ugly. And I think that it is going to put, hopefully, back to this point I was making earlier. I want to see this grow, and I will make the point about it being passionate in mind. We are going to make this grow. This is going to grow exponentially, and leaders and organizations like yourselves are going to be at the forefront of that.
I think it will. And part of it is, as I said, there are a couple of standard mistakes that people historically have made. One of them that Blueprint just innocently prevents is, when you used to build an app, it was very common, even if you use a visual environment or use one of the current, BPMN-based visual environments now, people would bake user experience into the workflow. So you'd get to a point in the workflow and they say, put up a screen, ask for this. Bang, put up something else, ask for this. And candidly, that is a disaster in today's day and age, because we don't want to be building our applications and building the way the business works around screens and people. We want to build it around the work itself. What does a loan need to be approved? What are the stages and steps that are endemic to doing that piece of business? How do you create a service catalog, as it were, for your company that reflects the work you want to do? And then if a screen is needed, yes, the system should ask for things through a screen. It should be able to do that. But if no screen is needed, it shouldn't be operating off of a model that has screens baked into it. And Joe, that's an example of frankly, if you go through Blueprint, it just naturally gets you there because it has you talk about what is the work you want to do? What is the business you're in? What are your outputs? What are your objectives? You can cut and paste from your manuals about what the products are you want to offer. Just put those right into Blueprint. It will incorporate those using the AI, and it will say, hey, here's the different types of work we do, the different stages and steps, and here's the data model that you're supposed to have for each type of work. And only then will it say, by the way, do you want to see what this would look like on a screen? And everything that's on a screen, 100% of the stuff that's on the screen, is also intrinsically API-based, and the screens are driven by the workflow, not by some, and the needs of the workflow relative to the data that is there or not there, not by some picture that's going to push you into a screen whether you need it to be there or not. So it's really...
And hard-coded at that. We don't want...
Well, because that's a lot of the stuff that makes businesses not multi-channel. I mean, let's face it, in today's world, everybody says they want to deal with their client across all the different channels. But if you go and you begin implementing a workflow in one of these low-code systems aimed at a mobile app, and then somebody from the, quote, web team wants to be able to build something into Drupal to create it for their website, and then somebody from the Salesforce team wants to code it into Apex on the Salesforce desktop, you're kind of screwed. You're going to end up having variations of that process, not that vary with true variations, but just vary with channel and the idiosyncrasies of the channel. Blueprint solves that. And it does it in a way because of the AI that it's so subtle you don't even realize it's doing it for you. But it prevents you from doing things that, frankly, our customers historically have sometimes screwed up. And we felt that was our responsibility to prevent. And with the AI, when we saw what was coming just under 2 years ago with the AI, we said, oh my God, this is going to let us take things we were working on already to make our model more effective, and we're going to be able to amplify.
And you put your money where your mouth is. Let's be honest. You made Blueprint available to anybody online. Anybody today can try it, right?
Blueprint is there. It's free.
Yep.
It's private. So if somebody uses and creates a blueprint, we can only see who did it and the name of the process. We can't see anything inside it. So our customers can feel comfortable that they can use it for things where they're trying to achieve competitive advantage, because the nature of our clients is they do all compete with each other. So we need to really try to maintain those separations of those walls. And yeah, we're super excited. By the way, I'll tell you, Francis, every 1 to 2 weeks, we add significant new functionality to Blueprint, because Blueprint runs as a SaaS app on the cloud. It runs on a Pega system, but that is available as a SaaS app. What that means is that the Blueprint you use to Pega World is probably about half as good as the Blueprint you'll use.
I better get back and logged in then.
Get back in.
Ron. So, listeners, if you haven't gone out to Pega.com and played with Blueprint, please go.
You're missing out.
So it's like, it is one of those moments where you're like, what the heck just happened? Like, you have these moments, like we've all been in this for a long time, where what the heck did I just see? It's fascinating. It's actually kind of fun. And Alan, I want to take that and tie it up with another big investment on the part of Pega, which is Pega Cloud, right? So I'm out here in California, I hope I'm not smoking the curtains, but a lot of what we think about is opening the aperture to non-traditional development resources. We think that's where a lot of innovation and a lot of improvement can be potentially unleashed. Blueprint, clearly makes it easier to develop an application, to your point, to develop it safely. But it gets you out of that blank canvas problem, and it gets you directly from there into a best practice coupled with Pega Cloud, where all of a sudden, we see, is this the opportunity to significantly lower complexity, significantly lower barrier to entry, and potentially lower costs, and say, I can have 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 developers in my organization driving this new wave of innovation, as opposed to, something that's going on in claims processing. Am I smoking the curtains, or is this something that's going to come together in a compelling way?
Don't smoke the curtains.
I think that cloud um, is a perfect complement to what Blueprint does, because let's face it, running a system that's important to a business has levels of operational complexity. You need people who understand how to operate it, know how to optimize the databases, know how to make sure that things continue to run. All of those elements, Pega Cloud just takes off the technical tape. It really frees up an organization to worry and think about their business needs as opposed to having to think about how they're going to run and operate. And we're really excited. Cloud, if you take a look at our most recent quarterly results, cloud has become the major part of our business. We see slews of clients moving to cloud who were historically on premise. And, we're going to make it so that our clients go there because they want to, but they're wanting to. And I will tell you, we've got so much automation built into Pega Cloud, where the system is being self-monitored. The system is able to scale up with additional peaks of usage. Uh, it's just tremendous how we're hearing from our customers who've moved to Pega Cloud that they just love it. So I think that's great.
So, Alan, does it open the door to a new class of customers for Pega? Because I'm thinking of my time at Forrester, I took on inquiries from Pega customers, and these were big customers. These were big brand names. This is getting pretty simple, right? Simple to provision, simple to build applications. Blueprint makes it way easier to provision applications. Does this open the door for you to move downstream to smaller customers because cost and complexity are becoming more manageable?
Yeah, I think already this really does open this up to a scale of client that we would not have worked with in the historical past. And there's also a second thing that I think is pretty exciting that is emergent. We've created a version of Pega designed for customers who want to themselves offer SaaS businesses.
Mhm.
So if you want to be in basically you've got a set of workflows. You're doing certification for state governments, or you're doing inspections for hospitals, and you are experts in this. You want to build an app that does that, and then you want 50, 100,000 customers of yours to be able to do these workflow type applications. We have a version of Pega called Launchpad, which if you go to launchpad.io, is super exciting. And we've really just sort of quietly put this out into the market. But we've got over 20 organizations that have built apps and are taking these to market. And what I love about those is these are really suitable for not just moving into a sort of different historical market than Pega would be, but allowing us to use partners to bring these to fruition. And we handle all the operational complexity. We run it on Pega Cloud. We have the software, including Blueprint, that makes it really easy for people to envision what these apps should do. And I think that's another way, Rob, that we're going to be able to really think differently about Pega's footprint than we would have in a pre-AI world.
So should tiny little analysis.tech build its Wave and MQ competitor on Pega Launchpad?
I think if you look at it, you probably will decide you should.
Well, it's interestingly, Alan, because I don't know if you know this, but I was watching Launchpad very, very closely from within with all the things and caveats around that. And it was one of those things that most excited me because it was that revolution. I call it the digital revolution, where the true future of software and applications is this methodology. But it was very difficult for those, let's just say, smaller organizations, those ISVs, as we used to call them, where they wanted to build an application and take it to market. They typically went, we're just going to go build it in code. We don't want to be paying someone else in perpetuity, et cetera, et cetera. But I actually think that thinking has to and will change. I think you're onto something really big there with Launchpad. I'm personally excited about it, and maybe I can get to touch and feel some of that later on when you're ready.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And, once again, you can check it out on the Launchpad website. The thing I like about it is it lets those companies focus on what they should focus on, which is how do
business
and how do they bring it to the customer. What Launchpad has that has not been as true in our traditional product, is very, very tight controls so that those ISVs can control what their end customers are allowed to change and not change. Historically, Pega has been known for its extreme flexibility, which I think is important for our traditional customer base and something we love. Launchpad, we said, hey, we're going to give the independent software vendor in this picture, who is the Launchpad customer, we're going to give them the ability to really control exactly what a customer of theirs can change and what they don't want them to change, because they need to be able to issue releases that are going to go instantly to every one of their customers. So they need to be able to manage the change a little differently.
So Rob, this is massive, Rob, and Alan, if you're up for it, we should do a whole episode on Launchpad, because it's the low code of low code. I think it's it's just incredible what I think, if the promise, and I haven't seen it in the last sort of 18 months or so, but if the promise is, as you said, and I think it's very exciting times for us. So hopefully we can step up and have an episode with you, Alan, as well.
We'd be thrilled. I'll even bring John, who's the head of the Launchpad business.
Mr. Hune himself. I love it. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. There were sort of two things that we never touched before, from this platform world. One was you bought applications, right? You bought business applications and ISVs built on code, right? And all of a sudden, these things are up for grabs, right? Do I build my business applications because it's cheaper, faster, and I can build something that's bespoke and custom fit and easy to maintain? And the same sort of thing happening with ISV. So this sea change is really fascinating on multiple levels. Alan, thank you so much for joining. This has been absolutely great. Listeners, please check out Blueprint at Pega.com. It is really super cool. ISVs, check out Launchpad. Alan, thank you. Thanks for taking the time. We really appreciate it.
Appreciate it a lot.
Always a pleasure. It's great to catch up again, Rob and Francis. Take care.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everybody for joining.
Take care all. Bye-bye.